No, no. Thanks. Arrow? Yes, right. Okay. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is risk. What is risk? What are the critical components and steps? What are critical components and steps? How can you develop a personal risk assessment practice and learning from experience? There is, I used to dive a lot in Northern California around Monterey, and here we see Lover's Point, a rather idyllic looking cove, and a very popular place for diving. But as you can see, there's a lot of kelp there. So that presents potential hazardous conditions of diving. So you have to know somewhat about diving in the kelp, and it could present a risk. And another beach near Monterey is Monastery Beach. Again, it looks like a great place, and it is a popular place for diving, for shore diving. However, it's also notorious for having accidents and often had 9/11 calls there. So you just have to know about what you're getting into and how to approach it. Many times I dived there, I got through with diving there and had a great experience. But people that may not be familiar with a particular location could get in trouble. So I'm just pointing out that those present potential hazardous conditions. So my background, I just want to put in terms of risk management, my background is in medical device development, and we go through formal processes for procedures for assessing risk. As you can imagine, we would do that for a medical device. I also have been involved in general aviation, and again, another area that certainly want to know about risk assessment and risk management. And I have quite a few years of diving experience. So let's look at some definitions here. The first thing is, what is harm? Harm is injury or damage to health. For example, an arm. And a hazard is that potential source of that harm. For instance, a moving boat ladder. And then what is a hazardous condition is that exposure to that hazard. So you have a moving boat ladder when you're trying to get up, and there's a lot of choppy water that presents a more hazardous situation. Critical, we use the word critical in terms of a component. For instance, a component of your regulator, if it were to fail, could cause a hazardous condition. Or a procedure step, for instance, turning on your air when you're about to get into the water. It's certainly a critical step. And risk, in the sense of how we use it with medical devices, is the product of the probability of harm times the severity of harm. So for example, if we had a scale of probability from 1 to 5, 1 being improbable to 5 frequent, and then severity, 1 is negligible and 5 is serious injury or death. Obviously you want a very low value in both. So the lowest of that range would be a 1, and the very highest would be 25. So obviously you don't want to get into a condition where you have a very high probability of serious harm, just common sense. But this is how we define risk. And here I'm showing the ranking of severity from 1 to 5 and how we would define each of those different levels, going from, well, this is borrowed from how we do it with medical devices. So it says may result in user, instead of patient, you say diver inconvenience. down to catastrophic, results in patient death, or diver death, or serious injury. And then occurrence or probability, improbable to frequent. So one is not probable, not likely to happen, to occurring often, happening repeatedly at brief intervals. And then we have what we call a hazard risk chart. So that plots out these severity and probability. And you can see severity along the vertical axis and occurrence on the horizontal. So if you have 1 times 1, you would be where it says 1 and 1, okay? And the most severe would be down 5 by 5. So the idea is you want to mitigate your risk so that you're as far towards in the middle or to the green area of that chart. And then we want to look at the risk to benefit, because we're not saying that there's zero risk. There's never zero risk in any sport, for that matter, or for that matter, medical devices. There's no such thing as zero risk, but you want to weigh it against the benefit of that risk. So, you know, there may be situations where the risk is rather high, but is it justifiable by that benefit? So, so where risk is looked at as probability times severity, the benefit may be looked at as the value times the likelihood of that value. So you're weighing the two together. You know, with divers going down 400 feet, there's certainly a lot of risk to that, but there's a lot of benefit too. But I think what we're talking about in looking at risk mitigation applies to whether you're a deep diver or you stay in the shallows. And risk without benefit is unacceptable. Benefit without understanding risk is irresponsible. For instance, high risk and low benefit would be not worth it. Moderate risk, moderate benefit would be managed carefully, and high benefit, controlled risk, acceptable eventually. In aviation, there's acronyms we use sometimes in categorizing different types of risk. So we have this acronym called PAVE. We have pilot, the risk associated with the pilot, the aircraft, the environment, and external pressures, meaning you're forced to do something. Well, what I thought I'd do is try to apply that to our in diving. So I'm calling that deep. So the idea here is we're looking at the different types of risks associated with the diver or the equipment, with the environment, or pressure to act. So here's some examples of deep. So the diver, you can have a head cold, you could be tired, you could be dehydrated, you may have a muscle spasm, or you may be anxious. You don't want to have an anxiety attack, for instance. Equipment, you have a cracked fin strap, a dead computer battery. For environment, stings and bites, a dead battery at night, light, or short entry could be, as I mentioned earlier, could be a potential hazard, or pressure to act. Everyone is going, so I got to go. I spent a lot of money. I went all the way to South Pacific. I spent a lot of money and everything, and I just got to go. Well, maybe you're too tired to dive that next day. I want to mention one thing about liveaboard accidents. So a lot of us go on liveaboards, and there have been a lot of situations where there have been fires or groundings. There's a publication called Undercurrent, if you're not familiar with it. It's a great publication, and they've recently published a book on liveaboard losses. And here's a list from them that shows in the last 25 years the various types of incidents that led to disaster. And you may be familiar with the one in California that really became public several years ago. There was a very tragic fire, a lot of lives lost in Santa Barbara. And so, as you can see, just in 2025 alone, there's quite a few sinkings and fires Thailand, Indonesia, and Egypt. A 2025 safety bulletin evaluation found most liveaboard accidents were due to poor boat construction, unqualified modifications making them unseaworthy, defective or out-of-date life-saving equipment, such as fire extinguishers, poor structural fire protection, blocked escape routes, or poor safety briefing or lack of crew training. In general, boat risk is largely out of your control. You're on the boat. However, it doesn't mean you can't take steps to understand or mitigate your risk. Asking the crew about the safety procedures there or the safety equipment. I did show here that you have a release of liability on most boats. States that the diver will not hold the dive operator, holds the dive operator harmless. However, in some jurisdictions, this really doesn't mean that much. I don't know about in South Pacific, I'm not sure if that's ever really been tested by these incidents. Failure modes assessment is one thing we do. In terms of if something could go wrong, what would happen? So, for instance, if something happened to your regulator, if a diaphragm or a gasket failed in a piece of equipment, what could happen? So, as an exercise, what you can do is look at each of the deep categories and think, what is the risk? What could you do to prevent or mitigate that risk? Think of the chain of events which can lead to harm, how to break that chain. Think of the chain of events which can lead to harm and how to break that chain. My buddy really wants to go to 120 feet today, but I've never gone that deep before. I'm a bit anxious, but should be okay. My computer battery charge looks okay, looks low, but I probably will have enough for one more dive. The liveaboard crew didn't brief us on safety equipment. I guess it'll be okay. Boy, the shore break looks pretty gnarly today. What could possibly go on? So this is formally when we work on these risk assessment and devices, we use ISO standards. For instance, this is a popular one, 14971, application of risk management to medical devices. So there are other publications you should be aware of or bring their attention about diving. Dan has a risk assessment guide, although this is for dive operators and dive professionals. But there's a lot of interesting content in that. Dan, if you go on their website, there's a section called Safety Prevention, Incident Insights, and you can read about different types of incidents. Dan, this is a great publication, a magazine that comes out, Alert Diver, and in that publication, they talk about risk and different types of examples of hazards and personal stories about that. It's great. Undercurrent, as I mentioned earlier, that's another great publication. I recommend it. And in Undercurrent, you'll find diving health and safety articles. And they have a lot of interesting stories that people write in about. Nearly half of, so Dan found that nearly half of our incident insight articles feature calm seas, sunny skies, clear visibility. Complacency can kill. So let's talk about some examples here. Uncontrolled descent. I was on a Red Sea liveaboard trip several years ago, and normally we would get on a inflatable or a smaller boat and go out to a dive site. And the Red Sea is mostly about diving wrecks. And in one particular case, we were just diving off the diving platform in the stern, and I was all geared up, ready to get into the water, and my weight belt just dropped. The weight belt clip didn't just unfold, it popped out, it exploded. And I never had that happen before, but it happened. And I was thinking to myself, what if that had happened if I was down 80 feet or 90 feet or 100 feet and it dropped my weight belt? What are the possible consequences of something like that? So here we have an example, and with my friend Chat GPT, I developed a scenario here. So a diver prepares to dive a wreck at 30 meters, 100 feet. The diver is 200 pounds, excess body fat, slightly dehydrated. The water is cold, so he wears a 7 mil wetsuit and added hooded vest and thick gloves. He is wearing an old, overweighted, borrowed weight belt. He is using an aluminum 880 cubic foot tank. He wears therefore a 30-pound weight belt. So all these things add to buoyancy, and so he's really weighted down. By the way, the weight rule of thumb are indicated on how you're using wetsuits or not. So for instance, if you just in a swimsuit, you would use obviously a very small amount, maybe 1 to 4 pounds. If you are a 3 mil wetsuit, start with 5% of your body weight. A 5 mil wetsuit, use the standard 10% of your body weight and so forth. And this kind of works out for me. So I think it's a good rule of thumb. But as it says in the bottom, you would add or minus, add or take, use less based on your body composition or if you're, what kind of tank you're using. So the diver spends 20 minutes at 30 meters before completing his dive. Because he is overweighted and wetsuit is compressed, he has added air. So now he's down at around 100 feet. His tissue nitrogen load has increased. He's been down 20 minutes. He loses his weight belt. Without warning, his belt fails and falls to the bottom. Despite efforts to retrieve it, he starts to ascend uncontrollably. He purges the air in his BCD. There is nothing to grab onto, so the rate of ascent increases. He ascends at 26.9 meters per minute. What's the safe rate of ascent? The recommended safe rate of ascent is 9 to 10 meters per minute. So 26.9 meters per minute certainly is immediately too high. The rate of ascent has increased now he's at, after 22 seconds, he's at 20 meters. The rate of ascent has increased from 26.9 to 28.1. He's panicking, breathing rapidly with deep breaths. There is a beginning of lung overexpansion. He comes to the surface after 1 minute, going 36.7 meters per minute. And of course, we all know that the relative change in pressure is the greatest near the surface. As Dave mentioned, when you, after a safety stop, take your time going slowly up to the surface, because that's where the greatest change in pressure is. If he had not purged the BCD air pocket, his rate of ascent would have been 65.5 meters per minute, and it would have taken 39 seconds. So what we're seeing here, potential barotrauma, and your lung has like 700 million different alveoli, or little air sacs with very thin membranes where air is exchanged with the blood interface. And if those alveoli rupture, air can go right into your bloodstream and cause arterial gas embolism, which has a rapid onset. If it gets into your cerebral circulation, then it could cause loss of consciousness, or into your thorax, pneumothorax, or under your skin, subcutaneous emphysema. DCS, on the other hand, is more of a delayed onset. Okay, so here's a case of uncontrolled ascent. This person lost weights from their pockets, from their integrated BC during the dives. My most recent diving mistake involved renting a BC at Roatan. I was confident that I knew the equipment since I was diving for 30 plus years, but the weights started falling out of my pockets. I had not secured the integrated weight pockets. So she goes on to say that from now on, I'm going to make sure I really understand a BCD, especially a rented one. Here's a case at about 100 feet. I hit so in this case, they have an uncontrolled inflation. I hit the inflator button on my new BCD, the button jammed, and shot me straight up to the surface in 15 seconds, if you can imagine. I broke the surface not far from the dive skiff. It's lucky he didn't ascend under the dive skiff. This particular dive was the first dive of the day, only lasted 20 minutes, and which may explain why I had virtually no effects. This diver really missed the bullet. He was very lucky something worse didn't happen. So in summary, maintain an open, if this were to happen, maintain an open airway, exhale, vent gas, try to increase drag by extending your arms and legs, use minimum weight to prevent it in the first place, secure a weight system and equip and use and make sure you maintain your equipment. And I tell you, I've rented a lot of weight belts, so from now on, I'm being extra careful about, especially at deep dives. Post incident, if this happens, if you see a diver, this occurs, monitor the symptoms, and use emergency O2, oxygen and medevac, of course. Gas management. So let's look at gas management for enriched air. We'll look at some cases where this could be a problem. On Facebook, there's a great page called Scuba Accidents and Risk Management for divers. And if you go in there, the forum, there are a lot of personal stories that are really quite valuable to learn from. I've seen air tanks with other gas mixes in them, particularly when a tank had 80% oxygen or deco and the label gets removed. Afterwards, it gets topped off with air. At Red Cell in Aruba earlier this year, I was given a nitrox tank that contained 98% oxygen. If I hadn't checked that tank and had dived with it, I'd probably be dead now. A buddy once analyzed the tank to find it was 70% O2. He would have died if he hadn't confirmed the mix. Let me just mention that I was on a liveaboard earlier this year in the Philippines, and there was a lot of nitrox divers. And we would get on a boat to go to this site where we would dive, and we were in this boat once, and we're traveling, and I'm looking at a diver in front of me, and it said air in the tank, and I was saying, I thought you were diving nitrox. This is why I am. So, well, how come it says air? Well, what had happened is the crew had switched tanks with someone that thought they're on nitrox with air, and an air diver that had nitrox. So, and I also asked the people that were diving nitrox on that boat, are you analyzing your gas? They said, no. I said, why not? He says, oh, because I saw the number in the mix machine, you know, and they were trusting that. Well, okay, what about that switch, you know, switch up? So be on guard about that. Idiotic, I know, but I went diving to 100 feet and checked my NDL, and it was roughly 30 minutes. I checked my buddies, and it was 15 minutes. We were both diving on air, and I had forgot to switch his computer, okay, because he had been diving on a liveaboard in a previous week. So here's a problem with enriched air diving where you don't have the appropriate setting in the computer. I was diving on Ambergris Key, Belize a few years ago. Our group asked for and paid for 13 nitrox tanks for our dives. On the day of the dives, we asked the operator if he had an analyzer. They said all the tanks were 32 and we didn't need to analyze. Two of us had our own analyzers, and we checked, double checked all the tanks, and guess what? They're all here. Okay, carbon monoxide. There was a incident last year, and also in Ambergris Key, a 6-year-old diver, while on diving, he lost his life because of carbon monoxide. Following his death, the police report indicated that he became unresponsive during the diving tour. At the same time, it was reported that the dive master guide had also became ill and unconscious. So looking down below, it says, according to police, the equipment, including tanks, was checked, and there was no evidence of contamination. Well, it sure sounds like it. Something was fishy about that. Just to mention, I had dived it through this shop 3 months before this happened. So, yeah, out of there. Dan has a publication on diving fatalities workshop procedures. The risk of diving by recreational diving or small, wild is small. The most frequently cited root cause is running out of air. Possible scenarios: distraction, kelp entanglement, unexpected head current, stress, forgot to turn it on. And I'll admit, it's happened to me. The, I first, the first dive I ever made with my new digital camera after years of using film cameras, I was so excited I ran out of it. You know, fortunately I was in shallow air and I had a buddy who helped me out with that, but you know, it happens. 13 ways around out of there and how not to, again, publication. So prevention, check your tank every time, even if you are an air user among night truck users. I don't, probably most people don't do that, check even if you're an air user. Always double check your computer for proper activity. Use proper gas management throughout the dive, thinking about what it will take to get you back to your launch point with a reserve, and double check your buddy. And by the way, I've been showing these hazard tables up there, and I'm picking that the severity in this case would be a 4, although the occurrence is a 1. So that's what I've been showing there. And of course, your analyzers you can get. Maybe it's worth getting it even if you're an air diver or a CO monitor. But I would say most people don't do this if you're an air diver. Most people don't even check for carbon monoxide, but it's easy to do. And by the way, it says $200 for that carbon monoxide analyzer. I found one that's a lot less. This is expensive because it's a very high precision device. Oh, so I wanted to present here some other potential hazards that I have personally seen or been involved with. So I was diving in Grand Cayman, and the dive outfit took about 8 or 10 of us through this tube that was formed through the coral formation. And this tube was so narrow, you can only fit in one person. And there was no way you could turn around in it. And it started like around 50 feet or 60 feet and came out like 70 or 80. And I was thinking to myself, I committed to it, but I was thinking to myself, what if somebody had panicked? What if somebody had ear squeak, problem with the ear utilization? It could have been a nasty situation, a hazardous situation. Mandarin night dives, I've done a lot of those. Sitting, waiting for the mandarin fish to come out at night. Saw a stonefish right next to me, so be aware. Choppy waters, I'm sure all of us have seen this. You're out diving and you come back and all of a sudden the energy in the water is a lot higher and it's more choppy. And that ladder is really banging. Head currents, again, I'm sure most of us have had that happen. It's happened to me a number of times, but sometimes it's tough to get back to the boat because of a head current. Kelp, getting caught in kelp, a feeding shark dive. Yeah, I've been on those, some not in the cage, and they're all around. There was a case on YouTube where I was at Bangka Lagoon with the tiger shark dives, and there's a YouTube on that you can see of a diver where a tiger shark has actually flashed on his mask on his head. Fortunately, he didn't die, but he lost his mask, and yeah. So keep your head on a swivel if you're involved with shark diving. Moving boats, that same Red Sea trip I was on, coming back, there's some popular sites where a lot of boats will moor up. And these guys, when they're done, they put on the engine and they go. And sometimes they're not even looking. So there's all these boats going around. And so you're coming up and you really got to be cautious about that. Bad visibility, lost buddy. You've been diving long enough, it's happened to you. So have a plan. Pressure, diving after a long fight, need to retrieve dropped article. There was a case this year or last year, a very experienced diver. She was coming back, everybody was coming back. She drops her camera. She goes back down to get it. She did make it back. BCD failed, uncontrolled descent. That's happened to me. I was on a shore dive in Monterey once, and the gasket in my the hose that goes to the bladder failed and started sinking. Fortunately, I could go down and just go back on the shore. Dave mentioned, I think you on an article you wrote about something like that. An octo failure. You can have an octo failure, and your procedure for when you're about to jump off the boat, you check your air, you check your regular, your primary, but how often do you check your secondary? You know, maybe it's a good thing because you don't want to find out it's not working when you need it.
Just for your buddy.
Yeah. Okay. You better talk to your buddy about that. Take bungee failure. I was on a boat a couple of years ago at Dominica, and the bungee wasn't secured and the tank fell off. Could have landed on my foot. Diver, unplanned deco stop. I'm sorry, it's happened to me. I was so enthralled with taking photos with my guide, and he said, you got to do a deco stop. But, you know, I'm much more cautious, careful about that now. But it can happen. What could possibly go wrong, right? Conclusions. So clearly, this is only a general review, and many possible failure modes are possible. Hopefully, it offers a way to reflect on how to better assess your risks as a diver and take actions to mitigate them. Consider the entire spectrum of risk. For example, what I'm saying here is you may have a probability or severity of a particular event, but over the course of time, what is your probability of any one happening over all the spectrum of different risks? So don't mind the calculation here, but if you were to, for example, have 30 dives a year over 10 years, your probability may be 26%. Or 30 dives a year, or this is a probability of 0.1% of a incident happening. The one below that is 0.2%, which is rather low for a particular event. But over 300 dives, the probability of something happening is 45%. That's, you know, just the math. Maybe most of you have never experienced or come close to experiencing an issue, but I've seen or has happened to me a couple of times over the years. Or close calls, probability is obviously much higher. So identify the deep risks before diving. As a diver, assess your physical and mental health and fitness, continuous training and learning, maintain situational awareness. Go to your dive shops, get some more training about, you know, stay current, don't get complacent. Know your equipment, regular maintenance, redundant backup. They had an article about that, right? Evaluate the failure modes. Scrutinize all rental gear. Check what's in your tank, in your tank, and check your computers. I use 2 computers when I dive, and I check both of them. Make sure they always have good battery power. Check what's in your tank. Trust but verify. Carbon monoxide, computer, nitrox, enriched air percent, maybe even in air. So I don't know. Most people probably don't check air, but maybe it's something to consider. Assess your environment. Bad currents, choppy water, heavy kelp. Resist social pressure to dive if you aren't up to it. Not diving is an option. Just like not flying is an option when you're as a flyer. If something doesn't look right, speak up. If multiple hazardous conditions are present, consider not diving. Not just one, multiple. So situation awareness, right, is important. Know your limitations. Be honest with yourself. If you see something that doesn't look right, speak up. Okay. So that's it. I was going to ask if anybody wants to share a story. Laura?
I'm amazed, every time I'm on a dive trip, I look around, and people are not doing the tree dive check of their equipment, their gear. And that's how I was trained. My late husband was a master scuba diver trainer. So every dive, I'm checking my regulator, I have air too, I check the air there, I check the pressure, and I see these other people just down with the okay, you're on your own, I'm gonna help you.
You checked your octo?
Yes,
Okay.
well, I don't have an octo, I have an air too.
Oh, okay.
I'm a photographer, I don't want anything extra on it. But I see, I go, what are you thinking? Not checking your equipment. And I'm a solo diver, so I'm being very careful with everything.
I can't believe nobody else nothing's happened to you.
So this is not an accident, but I've only been on 2 trips and all nitrox, and they've never really provided an analyzer, and if they did, there was great resistance to using it. And so, although like the training emphasizes analyze it, I found it very difficult to do that so far in my career. I don't know, if they're not going to do it and you just have your own, how do you do it without feeling like a pain in the butt?
Get your own.
Yeah. Good job.
But, I've been with a lot of experienced divers, none of them have their own. So like I've got 27 dives, I'm gonna have a dive a gas analyzer.
Was that boat, was it outside the US?
And I was in Turnett, and I was in, most recently at Captain Don's at, there.
I'm surprised because of course, most of the shops, everybody uses nitrox on the island. And maybe
They had
that's not.
3 analyzers, but they wouldn't bring them on the boat, so I was down there, I grabbed it, especially my time.
They're supposed to have it.
And I proposed to have meters, I think, right, sir.
You personally test every
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen anybody do that.
Yep. There's a difference in O2 in that.
I'm talking about the dive, the trip leaders too.
Just that little, isn't that change in O2 in there? Tells you how deep you are.
I don't know, it makes sense to me, I'm just saying, what do you do about the situation? What
Read his article next month about.
when it's not standard, I mean,
And I'm sure Captain Dunn has analyzers. And so before you even leave the dock,
They had 3 of them by the lockers, but none on the boats.
it's like totally just gotta be able to get a diver to make this happen. And
Yeah.
this is not happening.
You just have to speak up to the guy.
So if something doesn't look right, speak up.
that's really.
It's your life. Anybody else?
So, because I used to dive air too when I started, my first BC, I had air too. I was diving off the Spectre and a kelp. The kelp had a really nice umbrella on the kelp. It was thick. So my dive buddy and I, we did negative entry. Went in the water,
Negative.
negative entry. Dropped down, hit the button on my BC to add some air, and it came out. One of the buttons had popped out. Oh, I'm sorry. No. So one of the buttons had popped out of the air tube. So any air that I put in came out. At that point, my buoyancy was really, really good because I usually stay between 40 and 60 feet. That's my sweet spot for a dive. We finished the dive. The only thing that I noticed at the end of the dive, I was slightly negative buoyant. I was still 120. And I was about a foot below the surface. So when we got to the ladder, I had to kick up a little bit to get up the step. And that was the second dive. I missed the third dive. And the captain of the boat, he got me some gear so I could do dive the next day. But I had to get the low pressure fill and an octo. Then I got rid of my air too.
A good assessment management.
So you guys, in order for the people on the Zoom,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, please, Michael.
So the people that are listening on Zoom, you need to talk with
the microphone. So, anybody else?
Dave,
Dave?
So you know, we all went on that anniversary dive. So I'm down with Phil and trying to get a turtle. And next thing I know is my line from my surface buoy is kind of swimming around over there. And it started to unravel. Went across the front of me, caught some of my gear. So I just stopped, started unwinding, got stuck on something and pulled. And I didn't understand why I was turned this way and kind of moving towards the surface. And it grabbed my weight pocket, pulled it out, lost it. And $25 later, I got another one. But I didn't understand why I couldn't get back down and why I was heading to the surface controlled. But I couldn't understand why. It's because I lost that while having another incident. So something can always lead to something else.
yep, chain of events.
How about one last one?
How about
Oh,
one minute?
I'll go to Dave here.
Shows you where you were on the ladder.
I got an oddball story about kelp diving. I was down around 40 feet or so, and I was taking game, and I saw a big abalone, and whipped out my knife and went and got the ab, but I had both my hands under the hold fast of the kelp, and then I got tangled. So one, don't be afraid to let go of the ab. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to let go of my knife. So I was kind of stuck in it. And it wouldn't have been so bad, except I was free diving. And I was holding my breath. But I finally, I did manage to break the hold fast. But when you're playing around with kelp, at the surface, it's no problem at all. You can just swim through it. But on the rocks, you can get tangled under the hold fast, and some of them are really thick. Some of them are really strong. You got to watch yourself.
Good. Okay, we'll let you go, Rob.
You know, I was diving with doing some shore diving with some people, and everybody got prepared. We were all talking. It was a great time. Nobody really was having an issue, and everybody started going in the water, and it was wavy, and so it kind of catches you and takes you out there, and you really can't keep your balance. So you just kind of throw your rag in your mouth as you take that last step and end up going diving. Well, one of the guys forgot to turn on his air. And in that struggle, in like 5 feet of water, the poor guy could have died. So always remember and assess and keep your dive buddy close by.
I'll make a comment to that. Like, I've never done that, but never in my life. But just real quick, one of the first things I do is I put the regulator in my mouth, take a couple breaths, check my gauges to see if it's moved. Then I know whether it's on or off. Bam.
That's the problem with the computer. Doesn't tell you.
Oh, well, I don't dive with that. I don't dive with that kind of computer.
Computer doesn't go up and down.
So early on when I was diving, you had something up there about what happens if the inflator starts to go and it's just auto inflating you. That happened to me. I was maybe 15 feet. I was in bubbles before I realized what had happened. I was on the surface.
Right.
If you're down deep though, what do you do? Does everybody know what you do? We train now with that. You undo the hose. We actually make students do that at least once, just to know that that's all you have to do is just take the hose out. And it's that you don't unhook it from that side. At that point, you can decide whether you're gonna keep doing the dive or not, and if you do, you can orally inflate your BC if you need to, but you usually don't need to. Just let the air out as you come up. But practice that. That's a good thing. Practice taking that hose off of your BC, off of your hose, to make sure that you know that'll be the first thing you do. You start to go up. It's inflating. Takes a few seconds, maybe longer, to figure out what's going on. Just do it. Get it out. Get it unhooked so it stops.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Carl. So just, this will be our last one.
When we were in the Galapagos on a liveaboard, I had ear problems. I only did 4 dives out of the 24 that were offered. There was another guy who was taking all kinds of Sudafed, squirting Afrin and doing all this other stuff. After we got back, I put together a little video and sent it to everybody, and I got one notice back that says the guy's wife said that he had a perforated eardrum when he came back. So he insisted on going for the dive. That's the thing. He paid for it. He was there. We were on a liveaboard in the middle of the ocean. And so he went for it and paid the price. So anyway. Pressure, yeah. So I said, no, my hearing is bad enough as it is. I got hearing aids. I'm not going to make it any worse. So I just stopped diving.
So thank you very much, Jack. This is not really my job, but you know me. Thank you. That was very informative. Dale? Come on, this is your job.
So I'm gonna pass it out to Dell now for the raffle. So.
Okay, we have a pretty good collection today. We've got some good stuff. We'll start with the one with the most tickets in it. The little dolphin with the wallet. I guess that's what it's credit card holder. Buy something. Jack, would you draw, please?
Two, 6, 5, 6.
2, 6, 5, 6.
We got it.
Got it, got it. Next one will be the photograph on canvas and the little, I don't know what it is. Anybody? Okay.
2676.
Third one's for the Petra base and the sun catcher. Abby.
Uh, 2911.
2911.
Once, twice, 911. Sold.
Oh, he's got tickets right here.
Think you got 2911? It's a test.
2911.
That Dick?
No? No.
Dave, you got raffle tickets? Do you have 2911? Okay. Redraw.
Two, 6, 4, 7.
2647. Got it.
And the last one is for the eggs that Linda donated. Paul?
Okay, last four numbers, 2892.
Perfect. Thank you for everybody that chipped in and helped out with this club, and appreciate you all coming.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night. Remember, next month, November is the equipment swap. So if you have any dive gear, feel free to